Worldview was the number one reason why we started homeschooling in the first place, way back in 2015. Let me be absolutely clear when I say this. Every single book that you read, every single thing that has to do with education, all has a worldview, because each and every person has a worldview, and that book is going to be written with a worldview, whether you realize it or not. There is no such thing as neutral education. And this was something that I learned along the way, but it took me a couple years to really figure this out. The reality of the situation is it doesn't matter if there is a 10 Commandments poster in a public school classroom if they're reading a textbook that tells them that they evolved from monkeys and that the world began with a big bang. Every teacher has a worldview, and that's going to come out in how they teach. And every year, your child is going to have one or more teachers that teaches them with their worldview. And when I figured this out, everything kind of clicked for me, and what I wanted to do in my homeschool became so much more clear and focused. Children are being shaped all day long, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Neutrality never exists in education. That is just the reality of it. It doesn't matter if you disagree with me or not, because that is the reality. Every single thing that your child reads is going to have a worldview behind it. And you need to know what that worldview is, especially when we're using books, when we're using curriculum books. And that's why it's so important to figure out what the worldview you want to teach your children is and go from there. That's why worldview is our starting point when we look at curriculum, not the last thing I look at especially, and not just some kind of side thing. I want to make sure that that curriculum is teaching my children the worldview that aligns with mine and my husband's. And when our children are in public school, they are spending upwards of 30 hours a week in a classroom learning from books that is at odds with Christianity. And that is huge, especially when you look at the numbers of children who are professing Christians that leave the faith by graduation. And it's upward of over 70% at this point. And honestly, it's probably more than that, because that statistic is actually a few years old. I would actually place it higher at this point. And the issue isn't just where did we come from, where did the world begin? This is a what is truth type of issue. Is there truth? Because so many kids today don't even believe that there is a truth, or that your truth and my truth can be two totally different truths, when there are some things in this world that are black and white. Your children don't stop being discipled when a math class begins. They are being discipled all day long. And one of the other things that is really important, and I heard this in a talk over at Answers in Genesis by Israel Wayne this week, the people who have the most influence over your children are the ones that spend the most time with them and affirm them. And if you have your kids in public school, it definitely isn't you. Whether or not that child has Christian parents or not, it's the people who spend the most amount of time with your children. So that's going to be their teachers and their peers if your child is not homeschooled. And I'm also not saying that you are not a Christian if you have your kids in public school. So don't be screaming at me in the comments. I'm not saying that the only option is homeschooling if you are a Christian. I'm not saying that. I am saying, though, you probably need to think pretty heavily about it, especially in today's world. But I am not saying that you're not a Christian if you don't homeschool. Just want to throw that out there before I get yelled at in the comments. Which brings me to my next point, that the people who spend the most amount of time with your children are the most important. So who is that? Is it you? Is it a teacher that you don't know? Is it a set of teachers, especially if they're in high school? Is it a set of 3 to 6 teachers that you have no idea who they are, what they value, or what they're even teaching your child? Because that's the reality of public school, and you just have to trust that these people are not going to teach them something that you don't believe, which if you are a Christian, that's absolutely going to happen whether you want it to or not. Your child is going to absorb their worldview. They are going to absorb all of the things around them, the worldview of their friends, and that's going to mold and shape who they are as they become young adults. And as parents, we realized we couldn't just take our kids to church on Sunday and have a 1-hour sermon and that was going to be enough for them. We wanted them to be molded and shaped by the Word of God daily. And we knew that if we put them in a public school that taught them things that were completely at odds with what we believed and what they were learning in church, that there was a good chance, even just statistically, that they were not going to be professing Christians by the time they graduated from high school. And that was extremely important to us. And I think a lot of Christian parents do not understand this. And I really wish that more parents understood this early on, because a lot of times they don't understand it until it's too late. Another thing that homeschool parents probably don't realize until later on is that you don't have to do everything yourself. And I think I got really overwhelmed in the beginning of our homeschool journey because I thought that I had to do everything. So when I looked at math curriculum and things like chemistry, which I'm terrible at chemistry, I wanted to kind of curl up in a little ball and cry because I did not realize that there were other people out there who could teach this for me. And I could pick the instructors and I had control over the courses, the classes, the teachers, and things like that, the textbooks that we used. And I could find one that aligned with our worldview and that I thought was a really great class for my children. And once I realized that, I think a lot of the stress kind of melted away. But when you're at the beginning of your homeschool journey, I think it's just natural to believe that you have to do everything on your own. My goal has always been to raise independent teenagers because I knew that if I could teach them how to read and the basics of math, that they could teach themselves anything. And that's really what has happened. If I taught them the fundamentals of reading and they caught on and became good, strong readers, really, that is the foundation of learning and teaching yourself. So I started with that, and then I really started teaching them how to be independent, how to do their work, how to have good work ethic, how to be proactive in their own education. And now I'm really reaping the benefits of that. Like the fruit of that labor has been so worthwhile for my whole family. I don't ever have to worry about if I'm sick or there's a family crisis or something like that, because I know that my children, they have a lot of initiative and they will do their work, whether or not I can do it with them or not. So really work on those fundamental skills and you will reap the benefits of it forever. And so will your kids. At the end of the day, we cannot control our children's salvation. That is between them and the Lord. And there are faithful Christians who went through public school. I'm one of them, although I will tell you it was a very difficult journey. Very, very difficult journey. I had a lot of questions that people could not answer, and I had to work that out on my own. And there were a lot of things I did not understand until I was an adult and I was in a really good, strong church. We can be intentional with the influences, though, of our children. And I think it's something that if you do have your kids in public school, you are going to have to be a lot more intentional about, and you're going to have to work a lot harder to combat those voices that they're hearing all day long and the things that they're learning in their textbooks. It is going to be a more difficult road, but that isn't to say that it can't be done either. And I know that there are some very extreme circumstances where you might have that public school might be the only option for you. And I'm not saying that you are being an unfaithful Christian by putting your kids in public school. I am saying, though, it is going to be harder and you need to be aware of these things. If you have your kids in public school, you need to think deeply about who is shaping your child and what they're learning, and then tackle the situation. Okay, there's my little video for the day. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for hanging out with me. I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.